And then there's Mark on. Yeah. Make host. Yeah. Try that, Mark.
Okay.
They're with us, guys.
So my files, okay. Can everybody see a picture of a hook?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
All right,
lovely.
underneath, and I'll share this later, but underneath that picture of a hook is a picture of a fly, and it says this evening's date, and it says presentation to you guys. It's just that I can't seem to be able to get that to come in any other way.
That's okay.
So as long as you can see it, then that's good for me. So
Yeah, looks good.
See the hook.
So if all you
Very nice hook.
If all you guys can go to Mark's icon at the top and click on the right hand side, there's three little buttons, and if you click on pin, you'll have Mark on the center of your screen.
You need to talk a bit slower, Derek.
Yeah. Okay, so if you guys go to Mark's icon at the top, the picture of Mark, and then click on this three little dots, click on the right hand side of that, and click pin, and Mark will be in the center of your screen.
I haven't got that, Derek.
I haven't got Mark on the screen, Derek.
No, I got the
Just the
mobile
hook.
phone. I just got the hook.
Just got a picture.
you've got the hook. Well, let's
Yeah.
start.
That's it. That's lovely.
I've got the hook and whoever's talking.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Me too.
Can you see me
Oh.
now?
Yeah.
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 Okay, right. Okay.
Right,
So-
of a blacksmith.
Yeah, that's me. So, well, welcome to everybody that's here, and I guess we should. Do you want to start now, Derek?
Yeah, carry on, Mark.
Or do you want to wait? Shall we wait a few minutes?
Yeah, give it a couple of minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't want to start and then people get disappointed because they missed the first few slides. So,
Yeah.
so
if all you guys mute yourselves, and there'd be no background noise then.
well, I can mute. I've done that. I've muted all. But actually, now, Eric, now you need to unmute yourself because I've muted everybody. There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't. There you go. I can't hear Derek, so I'm not sure what I've done there.
Could be a blessing.
Can you hear me now?
I wasn't going to say anything, but now you mention it.
Can you hear me now, Mark?
Yeah, I've got you. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
There we go. So yeah,
Right. So talk amongst yourselves, as they say.
they can't. They're all muted.
So no, I'm really disappointed to see that none of you are wearing face masks. Because just because the new COVID rules say that you don't have to wear face masks doesn't mean that you should. So.
Look at Gav.
So. There you go. Have I got it right? There's 19 people. Is that right? Oh, there's three. Well, I'm cut because I think you've given me the authority to be the host. So I've just invited. There were 3 people in the waiting room, so I've just invited everybody in from the waiting room. So
If you keep an eye on it, Mark, and then let them
okay,
in.
yeah. No, I will do that. And then I think we just dropped Runa, so that's it. Okay, are you there, Rune?
Hello.
Yeah. Cheers. Good to see you. Skull. So we've got 19 participants. So
Yeah, I got.
is that a
19
good?
on the screen.
Is that a good? Is that a good sign?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, do you want me to start? Because I mean, the guts of it is a few slides in.
Yeah, you make a start, Mark.
Okay, then I'll make a start. So
It's been recorded.
okay, so I'll introduce myself as my name's Mark Hamnett, and I'm the owner of 3 hook brands, British hook brands. One being Partridge of Redditch, another one being Sprite, and the other one being Cox and Roll. And I'm going to talk to you this evening about who the company is and what we do, how we came to be where we are today in the UK. And I'm going to take you then through some historic photos of Partridge and talk to you about how we used to make hooks. And then we'll talk about hook geometry and all sorts of other things. Please feel free to interrupt me because, you know, it's much better to have somebody ask a question and I'll answer it while it's relevant than go to questions and answers at the end and then you get a load of answers to questions that are not really relevant anymore. So please feel free to interrupt, as I said. So I'm the great grandson of a blacksmith, and in the world of fly fishing, I would say that I'm a businessman first. So I'm a fly fisherman, but actually I come from a business background. I'm not a fly fisherman who's trying to make a living out of selling hooks. I caught my first fish when I was 9 years old, and it was a gudgeon, which you know, the overseas guys probably won't know what the heck that is, but it's a dirty little fish that comes from the bottom of rivers, and it's a coarse fish. So I did not catch it on the fly, I might add. I caught it on a float with a maggot. And today, probably grayling fishing is the fishing that I do most, because in the winter, our business goes down a bit, so I get a chance to get out on the river. I tie flies, and the flies that I tie, and what probably got me into the business I'm in today was tying spiders and Griffith's gnats, because I like to fish my own flies. So there you go. So slide 2, has everybody got that?
Yeah.
That is the old Crescent Works at Mount Pleasant in Redditch, and that's the old Partridge building. Partridge moved into that building in 1933, and sadly today, I mean, it's gone. And when I bought the company, that was not what I bought, unfortunately. That was already converted into apartments, so it's now flats. So that's not. It's still there as a building, but it's not got anything to do with the fishing industry. So, and so I'll just take you through from the beginning with a lasting legacy. The picture is Alan Bramley, who some of you may know, but Alan Bramley was one of the owners of Partridge back in the old days. But the story starts in 1936. And I've got the apprenticeship documents on the wall in my office. 1936, Edwin Partridge was apprenticed in needle pointing and bluing. And then really, there are a lot of things that go on in the history of the company, but the most relevant thing is that in 1923, the company starts to be a presence because it moved into this building that you now see in 1923, and at the helm of the company at that time was Albert Partridge. and he incorporated A.E. Partridge and Sons in 1933. I've got that incorporation certificate, so you know we know these things. We know Albert Partridge used to work for Bartlett, and the Partridges were working for Bartlett making their hooks, and then when he set up the company, he was making hooks for other companies. We'll go into that in a little bit of detail later, but Ted Partridge then sold the company, so he inherited the company off of his grandfather Albert. He sold it to the Pickerings, and the Pickering family were in the construction business, and they some point in time they brought Alan Bramley into the company as a shareholder. Him and his wife owned about 5%, and then they became more involved, if you will, in the business as the 1970s went on. In 1974, the company started making split cane rods. Some of you may well already have got those or seen them, but we've got a collection of those in the museum in Wincanton. In 1983, the modern era of Partridge, as we know it today, the logo that you will see on hook packets today, that started in 1983. So the 1980s became Partridge of Redditch. It went from A.E. Partridge and Sons to Partridge of Redditch. In 87, you might be interested to know that actually Partridge launched Sage rods from the USA. So Sage rods were first imported into the UK by Partridge. And then the next notable date was 1994, when Mustad took over, because Alan Bramley had had a stroke and he was not well. In 1992, his wife approached Mustad to see if they would be interested to buy the company. They took over in 94, and then in the 90s they actually relocated much of the production to Singapore, and that's when the company then started to go from strength to strength, because the distribution started to build up internationally, especially. Right, let's move to the next slide. So I came onto the scene in 2009. But before then, I started Fishing Matters, which is a company that some of you may know. We distribute Varavas leaders, Marriott fly rods, and American fishing wire. We've been acting as a wholesaler distributor since 2005, when I set up the company. We've done a lot of shows like the BFFI and the CLA, and a lot of the game fairs, and a lot of the shows around the UK and internationally. But in 2009, I bought Partridge from Mustad. So that's really when things started to change within Partridge. And I bought Cox and Rule off of Bob Cox in 2011. The reason I did that was because Partridge was a supplier to Bob Cox. And when we took over the Partridge of Redditch brand, we basically made it into a fly tying company. And we had a range of sea fishing hooks. Again, some of you may know those, but we had a range of sea fishing hooks and didn't quite know what to do with them. And what we did then was to acquire Cox and Rule to be able to put all of our sea fishing brands into that. And then in 2019, Vince Green died in Redditch, and we bought the assets of Sprite Fishing, and we've now relaunched that brand. So 2009 we bought Partridge, then 2011 Cox and Rule, and then 2013 Sprite. So we are the let's say the joint force of those three brands.
Oh, good.
So that's really a history of who we are today. As I said, feel free to interrupt if you've got any questions, but that's the heritage of the company, and how it got. It's an abridged version because I've got some presentations which are very, very detailed about who did what and who was the general manager and who was the site manager at the time, because some groups know the people involved, but I thought I'd keep this one brief. So let's look at how we make hooks. So you may you may have seen some of these photos because they were shot by Barry Ord Clark a while ago, and he's just started putting some of these up on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah.
So this is a big Bowie machine. So this is a Bowie machine for making big hooks. We have a lot of Bowie machines in the office, which are small Bowie machines for making small hooks. But the first and most important thing about making any hook is the wire, because when you think about it, that's what it is that we're making. We're taking a piece of wire and we're making it into a hook. So historically, the wire that we used was from Sheffield. It's high carbon steel, and the wire that we make our hooks from today is Swedish steel made by Sandvik. That's very important because a lot of hooks, as you may know, some of them are very brittle and they snap. I'm not trying to push negative comments about our competitors, but if you look at some of you might tie on Sakuma hooks or Tiemco hooks or Kamasan hooks, those hooks don't tend to bend, they tend to snap. And that's because they're made of Japanese wire, and Japanese wire is super high carbon steel. So the percentage of carbon they put in their steel is much higher than the percentage of carbon we want in our steel. So we see it as the difference between when you catch a fish, we want to make sure you land the fish and not that you touch the fish and lose it because the wire snapped. So that's the difference, you know, one of the differences that you will find with our hooks against our competitors. So first of all, in the old days, the wire is from Sheffield. Today, it's mainly from Sandvik or Arcelor in Belgium. So those are the two wires that we use today.
All right.
This is the pointing process. So if you look in the small picture on the left-hand side, you'll see there's a spinning wheel, and that spinning wheel is basically a carborundum stone in a wheel, and basically how can I put it? The pieces of wire with a thumb attached to them, those pieces of wire are pushed into that belt, and they are then taken through a grinding process, and the point is put onto the end. And if you look on the right-hand side, you can see the feed, and the chain underneath the chain is the grinding wheel. And you can see that this is, first of all, it's labor intensive. And secondly, and one of the reasons why we make most of our hooks by machine these days is because if you look at that guy with his thumb, and if you look at all of the pieces that are around that machine, they're all open. And today, I would not be allowed to run the factory like that because of health and safety rules. It's interesting that when I bought the factory at Arrow Road in Redditch from the estate of Ted Green not Ted Green, Vince Green from the Sprite Works, all the machinery was basically made in the 1930s. And it was machinery that Partridge had sold to him and that they couldn't operate anymore because of these health and safety rules. So that's just an example. But anyway, needle points are still the most robust and sharpest configuration that you can get. And the Partridge points in this day and age are still made by hand. So when we point, a lot of our hooks are still made by hand because they're big and they're still needle pointed in exactly this way, but they're done on an auto feed rather than on a thumb being pushed in. They then are fed into a machine that has got this pickup. And if you look at the bottom of this picture, you'll see what looks like a chisel coming from the left-hand side into the right. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the hook point is at the extreme right side of that, and the chisel comes in and cuts a barb into it. So you actually have to set where you want the barb to be against where the point is, and that's really the character of the hook. Because if you've got a long point and the barb's too far back, actually what will happen is the fish will come onto the point, but it will not hook up.
No.
So the point has to be relatively close to the barb, but not so close that it weakens the point. So we have to make sure that we don't damage the point by putting the barb in there. Again, I'm showing you the old pictures. So this lady is using a bowing machine, but you can see her picking up hooks by the barbs, and she's putting them onto a rule, and then she would be moving them around like that. And on average, a lady like that would be able to use a bowing machine, and she would make 50,000 hooks per week. They would normally bend them five at a time, and they would actually have those hooks completely. Well, I would just say they'd be completely controlled. But these hooks at this stage are just the bend, and the eye is going to be put in. But the most important thing is that everything is oriented around where the barb is, because it's not a mistake that the barb is on the inside of the bend.
That's what I was going to ask. You line them up, yeah, and you must have a jig to line them up to get them central.
Yeah, exactly. And what I'm showing you here is the orientation is around the barb, because otherwise you'd end up with the barb appearing in different places on the hook. Now, some of you may remember Hugh Fulkus had a pattern made for him by Alan Bramley, and guess what? They put the barb on the outside. It never really caught on. I've got some examples of that in the museum, but it's quite funny because when you look at that hook, you look at it and go, there's something wrong with this, and I'm not quite sure what it is. And it's because the barb is on the outside of the bend.
Would that actually affect the hooking technique of the hook?
I don't, personally, I've never fished one, but I would have to say no, because the fish, I mean, one of the problems that we as fly tyers have is that we look at something and then we say what we think it should be. The problem we've got very often is the fish has no idea of what we're thinking, and the fish either reacts to the fly or not. To be honest with you, I listen to a lot of conversations where people are telling me that they don't believe that a hook should look in a certain way or whatever, and I just would say to them, well, we've been making these hooks for 100 years like this, so you don't just change things because somebody comes along. Maybe we're going to try something your way, but we're not going to change it. We're going to keep doing the things that we know work, and we can introduce new things. But like I said, I think Hugh Fulkus's idea of a barb just didn't take off, because actually the barb then gets stuck into other things, so it kind of gets in the way.
Of course it would, yeah. Of course it would.
Yeah. So then if you look on the left-hand picture, you'll see what a bowing machine does. So basically it's a pin around which another pin rotates, and it forms the eye of the hook. So you have bowing big ones and small ones according to the diameter of the hole that you want to make, and the hole can only be a certain size according to the diameter of the wire. I can't make a hole so small that it's smaller than the diameter of the wire, if that makes any sense. So there's a lot of physical constraints that we have on what we can do and we can't do with a hook. So some of the designs of hooks look like they do because of the wire we want to use and the fish we want to catch. So some of it is about the manufacturing process that we have on that. The lady on the right-hand side is basically forging. So she's actually stamping the bends with a hammer, in effect, an electric hammer, and that forging strengthens the wire so that it becomes, even though it's a fine diameter wire, it becomes stronger. If we talk about a double, you then have to braise the double. So if you look into the hook forms there, you'll see that the tines of the hook are being set by the cross cuts in that stud, and then the brazing is then done with bronze and flux, and basically you then braise the shanks together to give the hook added strength. Now, I don't know why, but in France and Scandinavia, there are a lot of people who still tie flies doubles, which have got no they're not braised down the center. I don't know why that is.
I've actually got a few of those, and I was wondering the same thing, because it looks as if they haven't been finished.
Well, it looks like that, but in many cases they're made that way, mainly because actually, if you think about it, if you tie a fly onto it, the fly, if you want a narrow body, the fly, your thread is actually going to bring the two shanks together, so you don't need to braise it. And actually, the strength of the hook is from the eye to the bend. It's not from, a fish never pulls the wire apart, if you see what I mean.
No,
so it's interesting because we've all become creatures of habit, and we all do the things we do because that's the way we were taught. But if you were to unpack some of that and say, well, why do you do that? Actually, if you wanted a lighter hook, remove the braising from it, because that's one of the heaviest parts of the hook. Just a thought. Again, this is a good example of why the hell we don't do this in the UK anymore. That's a pickling process, and that's if you will have heard of the term chemical sharpening.
Yes.
Well, chemical sharpening is where we dip the hooks that are finished into acid, and what the acid does is it eats away any of the scarf, which is the burrs and any rough edges that are on the steel. It eats that away, and what it does at the same time is it has the effect of eating the bare metal that is the point, and it eats it into a sharper point. So we call this chemical sharpening. Most hooks are made this way these days. There's a part of the process. So it's not that you can have one hook which is better than the others because it's chemically sharpened. All processes these days chemically sharpened. But I want you to notice this guy is not wearing any hand gloves to protect because this is sulfuric acid he's putting these in. So I want you to see that he's not actually holding, that basket is not held with protective gloves. He's wearing no protective apron. So if the acid was spilt onto his jacket, it would be burning into his jacket and into him. And also he's not wearing any protective goggles. So again, I'm just showing you, this is, for me, it's a lovely photo, but in health and safety terms, it's a bloody nightmare. So,
yeah.
So this is Japanning, where we're putting black lacquer onto the hooks. If you notice, that is in a domestic mixing bowl, probably with somebody's paintbrush and 2 nails stuck in it. So this is, I'm going to make a comment in a minute about that. And then they're put into an oven to bake that onto the hook. So those trays on shelf 2 and 3, the trays are, have got japanned hooks in them. So as you can see, this guy that was doing that is coming close to lunch. So he's put his baked potato in the top tray.
Right, well, yeah.
So you can see, I mean, it's just, I don't claim this for my own, quotation, but a lady who some of you might remember, there was a company called Harris Sports Mail.
Yeah.
And the company was owned by a lady called Sue Harris and her husband. I can't remember his name. I think it might be John Harris. But Sue Harris once said that the fly fishing industry is a cottage industry run by amateurs. And this photo shows exactly what I'm talking about. So, a lot of things were made, by hand, but they were also finished by hand. So a lot of the things that you're seeing in those photos are how handmade they were. And this process, I've said here, Helen on quality, because when I first started buying partridge hooks, it had a name of a lady stamped on the back. Yeah. And her name was, in a lot of the ones I picked up was Helen or Tracy or whatever. So here you can see they're sorting the hooks they would make 10 hooks so that they're the same shape, and they would put them into a packet and then pack them and then would send them off. Today on the back of our hook packets, the lady's initials are still there. The one that packed the hooks and checked them, they're still there, but we just don't put her name there because I can't afford to have these ladies getting approached by you young men and being taken away to get married.
Oh,
So,
yeah, I can see them here. GW, SE, I can see that, yeah. TN.
yeah. So the
All
name, the initials of the lady are on the back of the packet, just so you know, and that's a fact. I mean, that's there, so that we can check it through the process. So we're thinking of doing an Instagram program where we take photos of the ladies and say this is this initial and this is the lady concerned, but we were a bit worried about what they might think.
Feedback, yeah.
So so has anybody got any questions then? That kind of ends the production side of things. So that's the old way of making hooks. I don't know if anybody's got any questions about the old days.
No.
Why do you black them? Why do they Japanese them or black them?
Well, Japanning is in the old days. I think in the 1800s they used to have what was called a Japanning process, which was layers and layers of black varnish, which became very smooth and very highly finished. And I think in the old days that was probably the best process that you could have, because what you were trying to do is protect the hook from getting rusty. So I know it sounds crazy to say this, but it's just black varnish.
All right. Okay.
And for some reason, salmon hooks traditionally have got black varnish, whereas trout hooks have got brown varnish. Now we have it as bronze.
Yes.
And I'll come back to that in a second. But in the early days, you may recall, they were very dark brown.
Yeah.
And that to me, that adds to the quality of, I like dark brown hooks, I have to say. So the new Sprite hooks we're making are matte brown, they're not bronze.
Yeah.
So technically, the modern hooks we should call nickel bronze, because what we do is silver plate them, and then we put kind of beige colored varnish on them. They're not brown paint like we used to do in the old days. So that's why they look different in modern days. And if you look at it, that means that the hook is kind of shiny. Now, some people prefer the hook to not be shiny. They want to, and so if you look at our, as I said, Sprite barbless hooks and Sprite barbed hooks, not the salmon hooks, but the trout hooks, they're made with we now make them brown, but which saves us a process. But if you look at the modern partridge hooks, they are bronze nickel, so they're bronze hooks, but they are super sharp because we don't want to put layers and layers of varnish on them to make them blunt. They're super sharp, and that's part of the process that we make. Yeah, so as I said, what we can do, if you look at the finish on some of we make, I don't know if there are any salmon fly tyers amongst you, but nowadays we make black nickel, which is where we nickel plate them, and then we put black varnish over the top, so that makes a kind of a shiny, translucent finish, and that is black nickel. And then we have silver, we have gold, and then we have now red, and the red hooks have got a gold, they're gold plated underneath, and then they've got red varnish over the top. And we've got green, and they're gold plated underneath, and they've got green varnish on the top.
All right.
So there you go. Any other questions on production?
Yeah, Mark, I went many years ago on Partridge Redditch fly tying weekend with Alan Bramley and Oliver Edwards and various people, and it was very interesting, needless to say. But one question I asked him, because then I was getting into Marinaro midge hooks, 22s, 24s, 26s, and I asked him why it cost more for a little hook than it did than a big one, because there's obviously less wire. The answer he gave me was it was labor costs.
Yeah, fat fingers. In 2 words, fat fingers.
Really,
it's a very different skill. I mean, especially when they're handmade hooks wise, smaller hooks are much more difficult to make, because if you imagine this, machines have to be set, you know, like when you put cutting the point, the eyes are tiny. It's much more labor intensive, and it's about the reject rate. So to be honest with you, it's about rejects. I mean, we make hooks now down to a 24. Obviously with Vince Marinaro, I think we did them down to a size 28, maybe 26. I think it was 26. Yeah, we do them down to a 24, but now they're machine made so that they're more reliable, but they still cost us more to make. We sell all of our hooks these days pretty much the same price. So we don't increase the price of the hooks based on the size anymore. So all L5As, it doesn't matter whether you buy them in a size 8 or a size 24, they're the same price.
Thank you.
Just while you mentioned that, Glyn, I'd have to say that we now have masterclass weekends from time to time where we've got a small number of people, and we have normally 2 guest fly tyers. It could be Paul Proctor or Paul with probably the next one's going to be on salmon. It'll be Paul Little and Paul Slaney. We've got a guy coming in from Canada, and when he comes over, we're thinking that we'll get him to tie bombers as well. But we do those. It's something to, now I'm connected to you guys. What I can easily do is tell you when those events come up. But we still do those. We've had a few. We had a Spiders weekend, which had got Rob Smith on it and Paul Little. The last one was Barry Ord Clark and Paul Little talking about deer hair and how to handle deer hair and so forth. So we call those master classes, and we still run them. They're on a small scale, but we don't want to put more than 6 people, and this is all pre-COVID. We don't want to put more than 6 people in front of a fly tyer because we want you to get a one-on-one tuition virtually. So
when's the next one going to be?
Sorry?
When's the next one going to be?
Next week. No. Now COVID's out of the way, we'll start planning. But obviously we didn't want to be trying to do it, even though the groups are small and we keep ourselves contained and so forth. We will get back into that, but I think the next event that we'll be at will be the BFFI, so that's in the middle of next month. But we'll keep you posted on that, guys. So let's look at a little bit about the history of our business. So as I said earlier, it's AE Partridge and Sons was the company in the early days, and what you need to recognize is most companies in those days were not selling their own brand of hooks. They actually were selling for somebody else. And you need to realize that Redditch was the capital of the world for making fish hooks. Well, it was the capital of the world for the production of fishing tackle. Any guesses as to why that changed? I'll give you a clue, 1939 to 45.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So two things happened. One was that many of those companies were requisitioned by the War Department to make military equipment and guns and things like that. And then during the Blitz, the Luftwaffe pretty much flattened a lot of those factories, and they never came back. The fish hook production moved to lots of different places, but it still stayed there. Partridge was still making hooks, but a lot of the big brands just disappeared, like, I don't know, Alcox and all those guys, that lot, they were just annihilated during the war. So, and in those days, as I said, few companies actually branded their hooks. They were sold in brown paper to companies like Army and Navy, Ogden's, Farlow's, Hardy Brothers. And then in the end, they were branded by people like Sue Burgess. I mean, these are some names you guys may remember, Phillips. Yep. And Vineyard. In the early days, John Vineyard was selling Partridge hooks as Vineyard hooks. So Partridge didn't really care about the branding. They just made the hooks. So as you can see here, it says fish hook manufacturer. They were not fish hook branding. They were fish hook manufacturing.
Oh, yeah.
And what you can see, so this is from an Ogden Smith catalogue. They were sold by the name of the bend. So if you look, you can see Limerick bend, Snecky Limerick bend, wide awake dry, all Pennell Sneck bend. You know, they were basically describing, there was a Sproat bend there, Sneck bend. I don't know if some of you guys, a Sneck bend is pretty much a square. And then you've got those Limerick bends are the ones that are pretty much at a 45-degree angle. So you can see here that they're being, so the brand is Ogden Smith, and the bend is what you're selling. The geometry of the hook is the up high and the bend.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
And so I'll just tell you the names of some bends. So the big green hook there is a Sneck bend, and the other one on the side there, that's Scott Brian will know that's a Carrie Stevens, the 45-degree angle there. But the names sorry,
I actually bought loads of hooks, and I had one of those Sneck bends in the packet. I think it was in Heavyweight Supreme. I've actually got it. It's on my desk, and I was wondering. I don't know if you can see it in front of my hand.
Well, I'll try and send a bill to you, because that you should have been charged extra for that, mate.
Could have been, yeah. I was just wondering what it was, and
no, let me. Well, did you get the right number of hooks? Because I mean, we'll send you a replacement of the one that you're missing.
No, yeah, no.
Don't give the ladies initials though, Gavin.
Oh,
yeah, there you go. No, if he'd been a Scotsman, I'd be worried, right?
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, but I'm just mentioning here the names of some bends that you will have probably recognised but won't remember. So there's the Limerick bend, which is this 45-degree angle on the right hand side. There's a Kirby bend, there's a Carlisle bend, there's a Kendall bend, and there's no prize for guessing. If you look at the bottom of the sheet, there's O'Shaughnessy and there's Aberdeen. There's no prize for guessing. These are all hook makers in different towns, and they kind of invented their own pattern, and they would name it after the town they were in.
All right.
And then you've got brands like Phillips, Bartlett, Adlington and Hutchinson. These are all names of companies. So they were branded Bartlett bend. So we bought Bartlett. So we owned the Bartlett bend, and we still use the Bartlett bend in some of our salmon hooks. Then you've got Sneck bend, Sproat bend, Crystal bend, and Aberdeen. You've got round, Aberdeen is a round bend. So all these hooks are named after something, but they are all unchanged. It doesn't matter where you buy hooks these days. If you go to a company in China and say, I want a Carlisle bend, they will pull one out of the packet, because they're still made like that. It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
Probably the guys that make them don't realize that Carlisle is a town on the Scottish-English border, and Kendall is in the Lake District, but they won't realize that, but that's the fact.
All right. Interesting. Very interesting.
And I'm just showing you here some early packaging. So from our collection, you can see originally it was just a label, and that's Best Kirby Hooks. And then, there's Lion brand. If you look at the packet underneath it, there was some branding going on, but it was not Partridge of Redditch or Camasan or whatever. It was just a name to remember the hooks by. And some of this was because these companies would export, and when they exported, they would put a logo on there so the locals would know which brand they were. So that it was kind of building up a loyalty amongst the people that were using the hooks. Partridge again, on the left-hand side, that is, believe it or not, the 1935 catalogue for Hardy. And if you look on the top there, you'll see Captain Hamilton.
Captain Hamilton.
So Partridge used to make the Captain Hamilton bend. It was our bend. And by the way, we still make that hook and sell it mainly in the States. But that is where it came from and how it came to be. And on the right-hand side, from 1982, you can see these are where the salmon hooks originated. We still make a code M and we still make a code N. So those hooks are still in the range. And you know, that just shows you the early, what we call the bridge logo. So that logo is the iron bridge, and that's you know, it's us and our heritage in the black country, or as Tim would say, black country.
Black country.
So and again, you can see the early partridge hooks. So they're describing it as the Redditch bend, turned down eye, handmade hooks by Partridge of Redditch. So we can date these hooks to the 1980s because of the term Partridge of Redditch, because that's when it was registered as Partridge of Redditch. And that was done because Alan Bramley owned the company. He was trying to get it away from the Redditch, the Partridge family, because don't forget, Partridge is not the bird necessarily. It was the family name. A curious mention, one of the ladies who works for VMC in France, her name is Partridge, and her grandparents went over to VMC from Partridge of Redditch to help them making hooks, because in the early days VMC used to make nails for horseshoes. So that heritage, some of those people are still there all these years later. As you can see, we used to sell hooks in hundreds in those days. You couldn't buy a packet of 25, you had to buy 100. And I can't remember the name of the guy. Who tied the dog knobbler?
Trevor Houseby.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Trevor Houseby.
There you go. Well, I want you to look at the code of that dog knobbler hook. K9. They got a sense of humor, those guys, I'll tell you. So the K12 ST is still in our range. We still sell tons of that hook. It's still in our range as a sedge hook. It used to be made in black, and now we make it in black nickel. So modernized it. And then you'll notice the early days of the Partridge logo. So it was just called Partridge. And then in 1983, it was called Partridge of Redditch. So, and then in 91, that was the new one. Mike Weaver, I mean, you'll see some names here you've forgotten about, but Mike Weaver, so he invented along with Alan Bramley, they invented the arrow point, which is a barbless format. Then Roman Moser. Yeah. That's the kind of more modern logo with the partridge bird. And then in the modern era, then we had the Homosassa. That now is the CS86, CS86X. So those are a very strong Aberdeen hook. And you've got the Bartlett. That's the HE2. We still do some of those, but not very many these days. We've got the Sea Lord, which is the CS53, and then you've got the Homosassa again on the right. So you can see the paper packets on the left are from the late 90s when Alan Bramley still owned the company, and then the cellophane packets on the right are when Mustad bought the company. Right. When I bought the company, this is what I inherited. And I just look at it and go, this is a marketing, my background is marketing. So this is a marketing disaster because actually the most important point there is called flashpoint. And as I said to you, flashpoint is just chemical sharpening. It doesn't make any difference. And if you look under these, it says chemically sharpened for sharpness, and it's called flashpoint. So this is saying chemical sharpening twice on each packet. And the logo is the smallest part of it. So what we did was to then rebrand it. So this photo was kindly taken and given to me by the late Terry Griffiths. So we use this to stay in touch with him and to show the significance of Partridge in 2009 after I bought it, emerging to regain its place as an innovator and worldwide hook supplier, which we have done. Yeah, let's talk about what happened in 2009. We introduced to improve the hook set, longer bite. I'll come back to that in a minute, which is a longer point, and micro barbs, because a lot of the old barbs were not micro barbed. We improved the angle of the down eyes. So in the old days, they used to be 45 degrees, which is an American trait to have the hook angle like that. And now we've made it at 32 because that makes it swim better. We introduced barbless, a lot of barbless hooks. We had the clink hammer, and we had the no, sorry, not the clink hammer, the check nymph hook, but not much else. There was the BIN and a few others, but not much else. We've now brought a lot of competition hooks into the system.
Yep.
And we changed the hook geometry to being a 4.3 point. So we made the point, rather than being like this, we made the point more like that. So they're sharper. Yeah. And because they're needle points, they're much more resilient. We brought back still water patterns like the G3A, because believe it or not, when I bought the company, the G3A and the G3A Longshank had been long since disappeared, and the market was completely dominated by the Kamasan B175. So we looked at that and said, well, 80% of all the fishing in the country is done on lakes. We need to have these hooks back in the range. So that's exactly what we did. We then brought in smaller sizes because the Check Nymph Fine 15 BN, which is the Clink and the Clink Extreme, those were all oversized hooks. I don't know if you remember in the old days.
They were massive.
Yeah, well, you buy a size 14 and it was like a size 6.
Yeah,
they were Redditch brand. So we've resized them now so that they are what I would call Redditch sizing. We reintroduced the classics like the G3A, the H1A, the K4A, K12ST, all those hooks. We brought them back. Yeah. My personal, you remember at the beginning, I said to you, my hooks tying style started, what got me interested in fly tying was the spider. So my contribution to the range was that in 2009, we brought out a new hook, which was my invention, which was the spider hook. And I did that in collaboration with Rob Smith and Stuart Bowden. So, you know, that we decided what the hook length should be based on what they thought. But it's a straight eye, and it's available in sizes 12 to 18. So the Patriot replaced the Salar because the Salar became extremely difficult to manufacture. So we replaced it with the Patriot, and that's one of our top selling hooks. We do millions of those. Barbed Predator hooks we introduced because in the early days when I bought the company, we had only barbless pike hooks, which meant that people were reluctant to use them. Some of them were famous, like Ad Sweer would like that, but most people want to use a barbed hook to catch predators. So we introduced barbed predators, the CS86, CS86X, and now a lot more. But we now do those in red and green as well. And bronze, we just introduced bronze a few weeks ago. Saltwater patterns we revised last year. So we've got a lot of new, really good saltwater patterns. So, yeah. And what we did at that time was to introduce the packaging into basically a polypropylene pack with this logo configuration. So the logo, as you can see, the Partridge bit is big, and we color coded everything. And that ran until about 2018. And then we decided to make everything a lot greener. So now you can see the new packing is much lighter, uses less energy to make it. It's a much better way of us delivering a product to you. And yeah, that's the new packaging. As I said, it's OPP for clarity because it's much clearer, lightweighted, and we've standardized the hook size cards. So we now only have one inventory of cards instead of having lots of different colored cards.
Good.
So any questions about the marketing and the packaging or any of that side of it?
No, I think you got that down really good.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I didn't know Falcus was that old that he was using bone hooks with the barb on the outside, Mark.
Yeah. Well, I've got I've got both of his books, one on salmon and one on steelhead, and he mentions it in there as being his invention. And I'm thinking,
Wow.
I bet you didn't make those on your own, mate. So you remember I got that at the beginning of the presentation. Now you know where it belongs in the presentation. So when we talk about hook part, the throat, as I said earlier, is the distance from the back of the bend to the point. And what we've done is made our points longer, because I don't know why, but a lot of the points from the 30s until the 90s were quite short. I think you all know about the gape and the shank length and so forth, and the eyes. But
Yeah.
this is a Bartlett bend. But more important than just saying the Bartlett bend is the throat of the hook is probably the most important part about hooking the fish and keeping it on the hook. Obviously, you'll know as fishermen, you've got to keep your rod up. But if the hook point is too short and the fish shakes its head, it will just come off.
Yeah.
So that's an important part of the geometry of the hook.
Can I just pick you up on one thing there?
Go on.
Is the actual throat of the hook. Now, to me, your hook's part. I love part. I've always used Partridge since I was a kid, and I've been in a couple of Welsh teams, Rivers teams. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was one manufacturer of hooks, Napec.
Yeah.
You know what Napec?
Yeah, I know Napec.
The points on those hooks were unbelievably long, and you used to hook fish, and the hooks used to go right through them, even through their eyes. So
yeah,
the
absolutely.
The throat of the hook is really, really important. To me, it is anyway.
Well, I totally agree. And by the way, the other thing about a Napec hook was it wasn't just a long point, which was, I mean, they should be illegal myself, I think so. Because they damage small fish. They can actually kill the fish because it can go through the roof of it. Yeah. However, the most important thing you need to know about a Napec hook, and also there are other brands like Hens and Dohiku. I don't know if you remember, Skalka was there.
Yes, I remember Skalka.
Hanak, all these bends have got a beaked point.
Yes.
And a beaked point is also very vulnerable because it's the wire is too thin. So in Partridge, we always keep a bullet point, and the hook point is therefore more robust. Even in fishing competitions, the hook point is really, really robust. And that's the most important thing to us. You've got to have a hook that lasts when you fish it. Also, it actually hooks and holds the fish.
Because the thing we used to, especially you see in Skalka and the Napec, is when, say, we tie the bugs or the jigs on them, the points would just disappear. As soon as they start touching stones, they would go.
The point would break off.
Yeah.
Totally.
And the Tiemco dry fly hooks, the size 19s, they the same.
103 BL. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, that's why I don't normally bury the competition, but that's what I would say is that small hooks on Japanese fine wire and also over tempered hooks from East Europe just snap. They're not serious hooks, but
they go through your fingers in an heartbeat. But the points are so delicate; it's pointless using them.
Yeah, we used to argue with some of the competition guys. They all wanted us to make hooks like that, and we just said no. In the end, it seems that we're still around, and some of the others have gone. So
yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about fish hooks. I did not invent the fish hook. They've been around for about 5,000 years. Now, you may not realize, but the ancient Egyptians were making fish hooks in copper. So I've just shown you some random fish hooks here, which are made out of bone, for example. And, ever since man was around and he looked at the fish in the river, he tried to figure out how to catch it. And he started off trying to spear it. And then he started trying to catch it on a hook. So what you can see here are variations of things like, as I said, modification of some of them are shell, some of them are bone, some of them are thorns. So you take a thorn out of a tree and use the thorn as a set. So these are all things that we recognize as fish hooks, but they go back a long, long time. This is not a new business. And I would show you here, 1881. This is a company that's making hooks. Look at the barbs on those. So as I say here, myths and legends, it's all been said before. So when somebody turns around like RX and says they just invented a hook, look at this, see the on the top row and the second hook down, that is what we would call a living nymph, or we would call that a swimming shrimp hook. That's dated 1881. That's not new. I'd also draw your attention to the fact that in the old days, they were spade ended.
Yeah.
If you look at those, if you look at all of those, they're spade ends. They're not, they don't have eyes in them.
Yeah.
Eyes are modern.
Yeah.
So this is actually quite an interesting, it's only, I take this on as a comment, because basically what I'm looking at here is the fact that these points are really, really harsh points. So you would have a difficulty setting a hook in them. If you look in detail, and I'll come to the next slide. I think if I go to the next slide, there we go. If you look in detail on that hook, you'll see that the hook wire is so thick that they've actually stamped the name of the manufacturer in the hook. So that's like putting a hallmark into it.
Yeah, but I suppose if you look at these people were probably using these hooks to hook that fish, get it in, and knock it on the head. Is for the table.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll even go, Gavin. I'll even take you down some more. A hook like this was made by a person, and it was made for a person. So these hooks were not mass produced. These hooks were made for someone, and a Scotsman, well, not necessarily a Scotsman, a wealthy man would have his salmon hooks, and he would take them and get them dressed with salmon flies on. And after a week's fishing, he would take them back to the person who dressed them, give them back, and say, redress these flies.
Yeah, it was.
So you would use the hook over and over and over again. It was not the same as we have.
That's probably why they're so robust, and they probably could resharpen those hooks. And
oh well, if you look at the inset on the right hand side, you can see what we call a gutted point and the non-gutted point. So the top point, you can see it's got rough edges on it.
Yeah.
Well, I then put the guttering in. So you use a rat tail file, and you clean out the gutter. That's the kind of detail that you have to put into making a hook that you're going to sell for £5. So this kind of hook is not mass produced. But by the way, I also draw to your attention that a traditional barb cut the wire in half. So actually, if you caught it on a rock, you would probably break the point off.
Yeah, that would be the weak point of the hook, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's what you just created.
But you actually cut the barb out and lifted the wire up. So
yeah.
We've come on.
So the next thing, so we're coming to the end here, but I would say to you that, so you look at this is an old chart. So if you look at the old Redditch sizing, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then we ended up with odds and evens, but we had, I think it was Farlow's wanted to end up that they could understand what was a bigger hook. So if you look, we used to have a 0. So if you look at the new Redditch numbers, you had 0, which was actually now what we call 10. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 was bigger hooks. And if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they become smaller.
Standardized it.
Adlington, Hutchinson. Yeah, well, what you can see is that as you got into it, you ended up with double zeros. So I'll show you in a minute another chart, but Phillips's and Cell and Halls and Pennell, all these different brands had different sizes. I often get asked, why is my size 8 different to Gamakatsu 8 or Kamasan 8 or whatever? And that's because we have our hook gauge and our wire, and we make our hook on what we call our hook gauge. So our hooks have to be all scaled to each other, not necessarily to another hook manufacturer.
Exactly.
A number of people have tried to nationalize the scale, but imagine now, because somebody approached me recently to do a book for Blacker. They said, oh, the hook gauge that you need to use is based on a 0.375 diameter wire, and the 0.375 means metric. I said, well, that's wrong, because actually the hooks weren't made in Germany or in France. The hooks in those days were made in Ireland or in England, and they would have been on an imperial wire gauge. So you have to look back at that. Even, in the USA, lots of things are on an imperial wire gauge still. The Americans will not change to metric. So it's quite an interesting, I'm just showing you that for interest. And I will afterwards, I'll show you some funny things where we were scaling one against another. And so you would end up that a size 20 hook would be 8 zeros, which is impossible to write down on a packet. So that's why we come up with the hook scale that we've got today.
Yeah. Well, like going back to the international competitions, they give us they've always given us a hook gauge.
Yes.
Where you got the size of the hook underneath, and you got the actual length of the fly. But the size of the hook is the important thing, because different manufacturers, like you just said, are different sizes.
Yeah.
Different sizes.
Well, we always used to get asked, can you make this into this size 10 into an 8? Well, if I do that, now a 10 is an 8. So
exactly.
It's
exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So that's the end of my presentation. I'd like to thank you for your attention. Have you got any more questions that you want to ask?
I have. As I believe it's more expensive to put a barb on a hook. Why in this modern day and age are we not getting more barbless hooks on the market?
I wouldn't necessarily agree with you. First of all, I would say it's more expensive to make a barbless hook because you can't bend the hook around the hook form without a barb. So barbless hooks are more complicated to make, and they have to be made much slower. So that's why the prices are somewhat different. But probably more importantly, I mean, I'm just right now saying that I'm going to get rid of barb. I'm trying to cut a lot of barbless patterns out of our range because we just have too many. People like Tim Woods keeps asking us for, oh, I need that in the 20, or I need that in the 22. So we're making hooks which are smaller and smaller and smaller, but each one preempts the next one. So to make a smaller hook, you need a longer shank, and therefore that now means we have to have a different pattern. So we've got, I mean, barbless jig hooks, and Tim, I'm not taking a mick really. Tim will tell you we've got, I think, 5 different jig hooks now, 5 different shapes of jig hook. So I would say we've got loads of barbless hooks.
Yeah.
It's just that a lot of people don't trust the barbless hook. I mean, I do, but because I know how to fish, and when you catch a fish, you should always lift your rod. If you don't lift your rod with a barbless hook, you'll lose the fish.
It comes down to education, because the one thing that people always say with a barbless hook is, oh, if you give him loose line, he'll get away. When do you ever give fish a loose line?
Never.
No idea. Not I, Leclerc.
In all honesty, I think a barbless hook, you hook the fish better. There's less resistance, just bump, he's in.
Well, it sets faster without any effort because the fish basically hooks itself. So
exactly.
But yeah, as I said, we've got a lot of, we do barbless salmon hooks now. We're working on a barbless salmon single. We already do barbless salmon doubles. We've got big hooks and small hooks in barbless. So I would say we do a lot of barbless, and we're actually looking at culling the range at the moment, getting rid of things that don't sell so well.
But I think it's the way the world is going with barbless hooks. Everybody's using it.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. Well, also environmental agencies in the world are trying to get us to go barbless as well. So,
and it's also us looking after our fish.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, any other questions?
Do you make an offset hook?
Offset, yeah, we do quite a few sets.
Yeah.
Offset hooks.
Barbless.
I'm just trying to think. Yeah,
The grub hook one in the mark, there's an offset one.
Yeah, the check nymph hook has got an offset in it.
Yeah, that's
Um,
a slightly one. I'm thinking of the jig hooks, the small jig hooks.
Oh no, we don't. No,
They do-
the wire on those is so thin. You could probably put the offset in it yourself without.
That's
needing
that's
it.
what I always do.
Yeah.
That's what I always do.
Yeah.
It hooks fish. They hook themselves when they're offset. They
Yeah.
hook themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They do. And people.
Any
people
other
don't
questions? Sorry. What were you saying, Gavin? And people don't what?
Oh, people don't realize it. People don't realize that with a offset hook, the fish hook a lot better.
Have a look. I don't know if
Are we frozen?
there you go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not moving then.
No,
No.
I think we've got a technical problem.
Is it
Hello,
frozen,
anybody
Mark?
there?
I can see Derek.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark's gone.
Can you see that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're back, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I've just
but-
carried on trying to. So as I said here, hook scales. So this is a bit of fun. Hook scales have always been complicated. In the Farlow's way of doing it, it was based on the length of the shank. So as you can see, there were, the lengths of the hook were based on the length of the shank.
Right.
Of the shank,
Uh-huh.
which is always quite an interesting way of looking at it.
For hours again, Mark.
Myths and legends.
We're struggling to get that one down.
Hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can tell you, yeah.
Oh, bloody hell.
I'm reluctant to do too much here because I don't want to lose the. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Well, it's your last page anyway, so. Oh, where have you gone?
Hello, Pete.
Hello, mate.
Well, there.
How you doing, mate?
Not too bad, yourself?
Good, good.
Where's Mark gone?
Yeah.
I think
Can
his
you hear me?
connection's gone, isn't he?
I think the connection's gone, but I got to the end of the presentation
Yeah.
anyway.
Excellent.
So the one thing I didn't show you was I've got a chart there which said that the Ludlow fly fishing group, we would like to extend. We have a website which is called spritefishing.com, and we can offer any of you guys that want to shop there a 10% discount, and we've got
wow.
a
Thank you.
code which is Ludlow10.
Wow.
So
Thank you.
So, but I'll put that after the call now. I'll put that onto the WhatsApp group. So that we set that up. It's already active, so it's been set up. So if any of you want to buy Sprite hooks, we've got some Partridge stuff up there, and we will in future have other part. We're putting a lot of what I would call the old back catalogue of Partridge hooks up there, like Blind Eyes and some of the heritage stuff. So it's a place that you can buy our hooks at a discount. So
That's good. Good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Very good.
Yeah.
So did anybody have any other questions from the presentation?
That was very good. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant.
Really good. Interesting. Learned some things tonight. Really good.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. Because we've said on the past, we've been doing this for months. You can have the best rods in the world and the best lines and leaders, but your connection to that fish is your hook.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I've honestly always thought, always spend your money on good hooks.
Well, I have if I go to a Fly Dressers Guild meeting, that's normally where I start by showing a fisherman in the river wearing a Sims wading jacket and all of his rod and gear. And I say that that guy just spent, let's say, if he's fishing the Junction Pool in Scotland, he
Yep.
just spent £2,000 to be there, and he argues about paying 50p for a hook,
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
and it's the only thing the fish sees.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So,
It's sometimes just nonsensical as, you know,
yeah.
Yeah.
you know.